going on, Wolfpack Nation? Welcome to another episode here of Tuffy Talk, baby. We are so excited here to be joined by the one and only Maddie Mcpherson, which I don't know if a lot of NC State fans might not know the name Maddie Mcpherson. Obviously, since we were only lucky to have Maddie for 1 year. But again, we'll get more into that. But first of all, I want to say, first of all, Maddie, thank you so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. So a little bit of a quick background here a little bit. So Maddie Mcpherson is a softball pitcher that was with NC State for last year's season. So, I guess the 2021-2022 season. And before that, she was at Georgia and then Georgia Tech and then transferred in as a graduate transfer. And now she actually signs with the Florida Vibe. Am I correct on that, Maddie?
You are.
Florida Vibe. Sweetness. All right, cool deal. So before we get rolling into it too, one thing I do want to say, make sure again, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. If you're an NC State fan just like us, hit that like button. Also give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter and Instagram. But starting out first, Maddie, so let's talk a little bit about Florida Vibe. So, I'm sure a lot of State fans, including even myself as well, I'll be 100% honest with you, that don't really know too much about the professional softball space, but from what I've known, it is a definite growing space. It's still in the early stages, and even to looking at looking at the schedule, because it looked like basically the schedule for the Florida Vibe. Two things stood out to me. First thing was that it was basically from mid to early June until early August, so pretty short season. And then most of the games were based in Florida or against like international teams. So can you kind of talk a little? Yeah. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that in terms of the format and, just kind of give a little bit of an overview for those who don't really know too much about the Professional Softball Association or League?
Yeah, for sure. So you are 100% correct in saying that it's a growing league. Right now, there's only 4 professional softball teams in the state, and that's including 3 in the WPF. And then the Florida Vibe, who I played for, is an independent team. But we're looking to get into the WPF, but that's all like contract stuff, not really player in, but more GM, president, that sort of stuff. But as far as schedule-wise, like you said, we played a bunch of international teams. So we played Team Canada and Team Mexico. They're just, getting ramped up for their years going to World Cup, the Olympics, different things like that, trying to set their national team record. So they're always looking for games during the summer. We also played the 2 other teams that were a part of the WPF, which were the Vipers and the Pride. So like you said, we're based out of Bradenton, Sarasota area. So we played a lot of our international games there. We also traveled to Vieira, which is where the Vipers and the Pride are from, and played them. And like our last series was a 6-game series against them. And then they were scheduled to come to us throughout the summer as well. But something happened with that where we just ended up traveling to them and added those 6 games on to the end of the year. So like I said, it's very limited in terms of, it's not like the MLB, where you have all of these teams that you're rotating playing against, and you have these super large rosters. But I think that makes it even better because you have such like a space to grow the game, and it's really important. When, of course, I know MLB, they have all of their youth fans and even adult fans too, but it seems even more special when you're so close to the fans here, just because it is limited. As far as I think it is growing, and that's something that with the Florida Vibe, that was like our main point. Of course, we're there to win. We're there to play softball. That is, yes, you are a player. But along with that, we really wanted to make it a point of this season, especially since it was the first season for the Vibe, of just growing the game and making not only ourselves known, the team known, but like how we can help softball grow. So that was really cool to see. Not only obviously to be a part of professional softball and play and do all of that, but also just get to be a part of something bigger than softball itself.
Love it. Yeah. No, and again, I think, it's interesting starter for sure, and obviously at the end of the day, to even get the chance to play after your college years, I'm sure is a blessing within itself for sure. Now, the one thing which I do want to ask, is I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is this a full time gig, or is this part time, or how's that kind of work?
Right. So that's the crazy thing about it. With the MLB, that's their sole job. That's what they're doing year round. And like you mentioned
Right.
earlier, our season starts at best early June and goes through
Hmm.
maybe mid August. So I think it's that fine line, which if you're able to make that your full time job, great. A lot of people
Sure.
aren't able to do that. So a lot of the girls that are playing, they're coaches at university, colleges, so they can have that time off for those 2 to 3 months because it's sort of like, what corporate job is going to allow you to take off those 3 months?
Right.
But I think, if you're lucky enough to find a company or a corporate job like that, then it is something that's challenging. And I think that is a big part of the game that they're trying to make it where, they're increasing the salary to hopefully make it a full time job. Um, it is different because it's like, how are you going to have time for your job and then train and, do everything you need to do to make sure that you're still ready? So it's definitely different, but it's worth it all in the same.
Yeah, I was noticing here at your schedule that you guys played this past season because you mentioned it's really it looks like it's through the summer months for the most part. Um,
Mhm.
y'all had a pretty good winning record, and I'm curious what you've learned playing in a professional league, how much different that is as compared to playing in college softball. Do you really notice the step up in competition?
Oh yeah, for sure. Not that college wasn't hard. It was. I mean, you're facing great competition there every single day. But it's like, the teams that you're playing here, those were the best of the best on their team. So it's like you really have, and for me, I mean, that was my first year playing. Some of these girls have been playing 5, 6, 7, plus years, and they're already experienced. For me, it was sort of like, I don't really fangirl, but
Hmm,
when somebody that I grew up watching and I'm
right.
pitching to, I'm like, oh my gosh, like who is the, I'm pitching against one of my idols over here or playing against them. So I sort of had to take a step back and realize, like meet them where you're at. Like, yes, you did watch them, grow up and you play and whatever it may be. And like you love them, but like you're also in the same space as them too. So sort of recognizing that and being like, okay, like, yeah, I did like you. I watched you play, but like I'm here to compete too.
Right.
But it definitely was. I mean, I had to learn so much. Not that you aren't out there competing every pitch you are, but I think for me, it was more on the mental side of like, these girls are good, and you just have to go out there and own your stuff and make sure you're doing everything right so that you're more than fully prepared to be there.
Sure, yeah, and I'm curious. All this is an interview about you, but I am curious. Who are some of those players that you grew up they were playing and you were growing up watching?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough, or a little bit of both sides. So some of the players that were on my team, AJ Andrews, she played at LSU, and
Okay.
I, like y'all mentioned before, I went to Georgia beforehand. So we never actually met up, but we were really close to playing all in the same years. But before I got there, I watched her play throughout the season. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like when I first met her, I was a little like, what do I go up and say? Like, do I say,
Yeah.
hey, do I let her come up to me? Like, here's this newbie that's 23 years old. And it's like, what do I do? So
Right.
she came up to me and it was literally the most like natural, organic conversation of like, hey, how's your day? What's going on? Like, why am I even nervous about this? I
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Down to earth. Right.
She's just a normal person, just out here playing softball. As far as other teams, um, Jalen Ford, she went to James Madison, and she was a great player, but she plays in Japan as well.
Hmm.
So always watched her growing up, and she's a lefty pitcher. So I sort of was like, this is somebody that I can watch and I can be like. And then getting to play against her, I was like trying to just watch while we were playing. I'm like, okay, what is she doing? Like, I need to know what she's doing so I
Studying.
can be like that. So I think that was also a really cool part of being there is like being with that talent and watching. You're always trying to pick up something of what they're doing. And just how like friendly everyone is. Like, of course, it's a competition and it's a game, but after the game, like because it is so limited, we're all in it together. It's like, hey, I noticed you were doing this. Like, can you talk to me more about that? I just found that was really cool that people were so willing to help.
Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flightland's Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need. Offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flightland's Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flightlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flightlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. So yeah, because you were talking about too, meeting, kind of people you've looked up to or that you've seen, play before, and two immediate, examples come to mind. First of all was former other NC State Pac Pro Naeem Hines with the Colts
Right.
when he got to meet Tavon Austin, who's a former college star at West Virginia, and him being mic'd up during that moment, and Naeem Hines talking like, "Man, that's Tavon Austin." Like, what do I say? So exactly what you were saying. Like, I was thinking in my head, like, hey, that's exactly what Naeem Hines
It's
said.
like a thing where
where
you
he is
can't
now.
really understand it from your perspective because we're not in the same position as you, but you can just imagine what that would be like. If I saw one of my, idols or heroes growing up, I can only imagine what that would be like experience-wise.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
And sorry to interrupt, but
no,
as
please
far
go.
so before I went to NC State, the past 2 summers before that, I played in the FGCL, which is the Florida Gulf Coast League, and it's a summer collegiate league. Just like, they created it, it's fairly new. They just had their 3rd season this past summer because the owner, Ryan Moore, who also owns the Florida Vibe, created it. And he was like, baseball, they have all of these opportunities to go play over the summer and get better and have that game experience. Why aren't we doing something like that with softball? And to sort of go off of like meeting idols and playing the pros, what was really cool about that was not only were you playing in the summer, but at the end, if you were selected on like the all-star team, you were able to go play the Pride in a 3-game series. So before I was even playing these people, like being a pro with them, I got to play them twice. So 6 games, or really 9 games. Before ever doing that. So it made me feel a little bit better that I played them beforehand in college. And I was like, okay, like I've pitched this person before. So when I got to season this past summer, I was like, okay, I've done this. I did this 2 years ago. I did it last year. Like, I'm okay.
Right.
Yeah. So, definitely the thing which I've been dying to ask and I've been wondering for sure is so how is it the process in terms of like, how did you, like, is it a tryout process in order to get into, the league? Is it, that kind of a
Right.
recruit, or like not a recruit, but they reach out to you kind of deal? What's that process like?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, Ryan, who started the FGCL, is the owner of and president of the Florida Vibe. So I was already really familiar with him. He watched me play the past 2 summers, had a really personal contact with him. And, of course, like growing up and playing sports or playing softball, whatever your sport is, I think that's the main goal of, I want to play pro. I want to play pro. And that's what I always said. And I'm sure people thought I was crazy because, I didn't have the most like storybook career of, All American, All ACC. Like, in fact, I don't have any of those awards. I was just, a consistent pitcher that got the job done. So I'm sure when people said that, they were like, why is she saying she's going to go pro? Like, she doesn't have all of these crazy awards. And I was like, what? I'm not going to focus on like proving. I sort of lived my last like season saying, what? I'm not going to focus on proving other people wrong, but I'm going to prove myself right. Like, I'm going to do this. So that's something that me and Ryan talked about like the past 2 summers. It was in the works. He said, I'm thinking about starting this pro team. How can we create this? What can we do? Like, would you, can we have ideas? Yada, 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 all that good stuff. So I sort of knew that it was going on in the background of the past 2 seasons, but I just never thought it would be an actual reality. Like, of course, I hoped that it was going to be a reality. And,
Sure.
During the season, he mentioned it to me, I guess, like middle way through the season, and really didn't. He was like, hey, you're on the list of pitchers. Like, we really want you. And of course, like, we would love to have you, but we have to see how the season goes, how postseason goes. Like, I can't give you a final answer, until that happens. And I was like, I completely understand. Like, it's a business, like, we're friends, but it's a business first. Like, totally get that. So of course it was in the back of my mind playing. And once season finished, I still didn't have a solid answer. And I was like, well, I'm happy with how my career ended. Like, of course I wish we would have went further, but I was like, okay, what to do now? And I was actually thinking about going to play overseas and would have loved to do that. So I was talking to a few people, and then Ryan called me one day and he was like, well, what do you think about this? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm in. Like, I would love to play.
Yeah.
So I guess it's probably not the most like ideal or like idolized, story of, oh, this is how it happened. It was sort of in a roundabout way. But I think that also probably describes like how my career went, like just persevering and just being consistent and not really worrying about like, of course this is the end goal, but you can't make that the only thing that you're focused on. So just really living in the moment and making sure you're doing what you need to do at that time. And then, everything will take care of itself if it's meant to be.
Absolutely. So, and you kind of mentioned too, obviously getting an opportunity to play Team Mexico, and one player that jumps to mind is Tatiana Forbes, who plays with Team Mexico, right? And because you didn't have the chance to play with her while she was state, correct?
No, so when she graduated a year before I did. So she was we played Team Mexico, and then she was also on the Vipers this past summer. So played with her or played against her. But funny enough, when I was at Georgia Tech, Tati was like my hardest out. I was like, I cannot get this girl out. Like, what's going on? So, of course, I didn't know her. I knew of her. And that's sort of how we still were throughout this past summer. It was like, we'd pass by and like say hey or make like quick glances, but we were never like, oh, like go up and chit chat about it. But we were like, okay, we both know we went to NC State. We just didn't like personally know each other.
I gotcha. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and kind of talking about too, I'm curious. So you kind of mentioned earlier in terms of balancing, being ready for softball, obviously playing the games themselves as well as too. You have a job as well. So what does your kind of usual like weekly, daily schedule look like? How much training is there in it, and how do you kind of balance that?
Right. So, like I was saying earlier, I recently started a new job, and fortunately enough, so it's Hanover Research, and it's a marketing and data analytics research firm, which sounds really crazy, but it is actually all remote. So, I am working from home, which probably is like the best possible outcome I could have. It's best of both worlds. So, I just started that and doing all the training this week. So as far as like moving forward, what the week would look like, I do my normal job. And then for me, luckily I'm a pitcher. I feel like pitchers are really specialized and individualized. So, I can go through a bullpen without having to have people hitting me ground balls or anything like that. So fortunately it's a little easier that way because I can throw to a catcher, or I can have a 9-pocket, 16-pocket net. That I can really do things myself. So for me, it's doing my job, getting a bullpen in, having that planned out, and then working out as well, which isn't too different, I feel like, from what I did in college either, because, that job is sort of taking place of like what I did in classes. That's how it was scheduled for me. Had that class time, went to practice, worked out. So it's not too different, but, I was also prepared with it from what we did in college.
Yeah, and I'm curious, you mentioned the practice you have. Are there any areas that you're really trying to work on in your, first years of, pitching and professional softball?
I think for me, it is working to stay in game shape and to still have that like throwing to batters. For me, that's how I get better. Like, I know there are times that you need to have a bullpen where you can work on things, to work on your spins, things like that. But I also, we all know what works best for us. And I know that I get better when I'm throwing live at bats. So I have been trying to like scope out people around me and be like, hey, which a lot of them are still in college. I'm like, if you have free time, like, would you like let me come pitch to you, please? I'd really appreciate that. So it really, I guess, works out for both of us where they're getting, at bats where they can work on things, but I can also work on what I need to. And I think what's also a little different for me is working, in college you have a set routine. Like Coach DeVries would be like, this is what we're doing this day. This is our practice plan. This is what you're doing. And for me, I think right now it's like, okay, I have full control of what I'm doing. Like, what do I need to work on? I think that's probably, I wouldn't say the hardest part, but it's definitely different on thinking for yourself of like, okay, this is what I need to work on. And somebody's not telling me directly, we're doing this drill today and we're doing this and this. You're figuring out on your own.
Yeah.
And not to say that you can't reach out and ask questions and you ask her or ask teammates, because it is like that collaborative space, but it's also like, okay, well, you are on your own at the same time.
Yeah. And kind of one, I guess a two-parter question to kind of wrap this first part up and kind of the professional side up is, so what would you say has been the most surprising part of your first season in professional so far? And then part B is what has been your favorite moment? So surprise and then favorite moment.
Okay. Sorry, I had to think about this. Surprise and favorite moment.
Yeah.
You don't have to go in that order either. You can
not necessarily. Yeah.
I think probably my favorite moment was our last game this past season. I threw a perfect game, and
nice.
I was like,
bravo.
Just so shocked. I was like, what in the world's going on here? Like, this is my first season. Why, like, how am I throwing a perfect game? Of course I was so glad to do it, but I think it was sort of like the storybook ending of, we were like, this first season's perfect. And, that's all we could think about afterwards. It was like, during the game, I wasn't even thinking, because you don't think about the perfect game. You don't think about you're throwing a no-hitter. You're just throwing that one pitch, and that's what it is. So I didn't even realize I was throwing it. And, after the game, they were like, did you know you threw a perfect game? And I was like, well, I mean, now that I think about it, I guess there wasn't anybody on base. And we just sort of made it a joke after that of that it was the perfect ending to our perfect first season. So that was probably my favorite moment. Just, I don't know. I think it was something that, you throw no hitters in college and high school and perfect games even, but to do it your first season pro, that was really, really neat. And then biggest surprise, was that it?
Yeah, but it's like what, like the biggest surprise in terms of, it could have been like, like something you didn't expect, transition wise, even too, I mean, just moving into the adult life, it doesn't even have necessarily be, necessarily softball 100% related. Exactly.
Right. Okay. Biggest surprise. Sorry, I'm still thinking about this. Biggest surprise probably for me was that how laid back the practices were. Which probably isn't that crazy to be like, oh wow, like this is her biggest surprise. But I was expecting to have like super, not that they weren't very like intense practices, they were, but how laid back and calm everybody was. And that they were like, this is practice. We're doing our own thing. We're going to work on this, this, and this. And like nobody made it a bigger deal than it was. And I think that maybe I was just in like a sticker shock of like, oh my gosh, I'm finally here. Like I'm doing it. And everybody was like, I've been here,
True. Okay, that's great. Hey, that's a good one. Hey, I completely get that 100%. Well, so with that being said, so Wolfpack Nation, we're gonna wrap it up our first part right there. But make sure to tune in back for part 2, as we'll actually start diving into her time at NC State. Obviously, she's repping it still loud and proud, which is great. But also to even kind of talking about her journey to NC State as well. So with that being said, Maddie, first of all, for any State fan that wants to follow you, keep up with you, with the the Florida vibe and seek what else you're doing. Are you, would you mind kind of tagging in any kind of social media or anything that you, you can help the fans kind of keep track of you at all?
Yeah. So my like Twitter handles, Instagram handles, that type of.
Absolutely. Got it.
Is it bad that I don't actually know them? I believe that they're all very similar, either Instagram or Twitter. They're all Maddie Mac 313. If you look that up, they may have like some underscores in them, but I believe for the most part, they're all very similar.
I'm looking it up on your Twitter right now. It's Maddie Mac 313 with no underscores.
Maybe Instagram underscore.
Yeah.
But I know they're all similar.
No worries. So what we'll do, Maddie and Wolfpack Nation, is if you want to give Maddie a follow on any of her social media, we'll have the links to those in the description below. So make sure to check that out. And then also, too, if you haven't already, make sure once again, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out whenever we release any new NC State content. And also, too, if you're a diehard NC State fan just like us, make sure again to hit that like button. And also, too, make sure to check out our channel memberships. For as little as $1.99 per month, you get access to exclusive content, exclusive videos. We just released our interview with Lacey Steele, NC State women's basketball commit. To see part 2 of that, all you have to do is be a member. Again, only $1.99 a month. You get access to videos, emojis, newsletter, private Discord channel, all that jazz. So a ton of value there for, again, so little cost. And also, to give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter and Instagram. But with that being said, make sure to tune in back for part 2. We'll see y'all then. Go Pack, y'all.